Welcome to the Period Besties Podcast with Stasha and Katie. Think about it as chatting with your best friends about all the TMI stuff you've never talked about before with two period coaches who've been helping hormones collectively for over 20 years now. I'm Stasha.
And I'm Katie, and we're pulling back the curtain on what it's like in the world of menstrual coaching. From puberty to menopause and everything in between, we're here to show you how period coaching can save the day. We'll share practical tips and information you can put to immediate use to improve your hormones and happiness.
We're removing the mystery, ending the taboo, and shining a light on just how powerful period coaching can be.
So whether you need period coaching or are considering becoming a period coach yourself, these episodes are going to help you. We'll share stories, coach live on air, and bring smart, savvy guests to share their wisdom too. Let's start today's episode.
Welcome to the Period Besties Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Eileen, who's going to be doing a little period coaching with us, but with a twist. We're going to be talking about business and cycle syncing, which is going to be a lot of fun, but also with her unique situation where she's moving into perimenopause. So we'll have a little chat about that as well, and business and that situation. So I think this is going to be a really fun one, and going with our business and flow theme of the last few weeks that you've been hearing on the podcast. And if you have a chance, we're going to have Eileen share a little bit about her podcast at the end. So stay tuned because it's fun. And I was a guest on her podcast, and you're going to want to listen to it because I think you'll really enjoy it to our listeners. So we'll have a little chat with her at the end about that as well. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, we are too. We were going through your form and we have a couple of questions for you just to get a little bit of clarity and to make sure the audience is in on all of the key details that they will need to know to follow along as well. So one of the things that we noticed on your chart was that you're not super irregular. You're about 23 to 28 days, which totally falls within the realm of normal. And I think it's a good conversation because a lot of people think that if they don't have their cycle every 28 days exactly, that it's an irregular cycle. Not absolutely within the realm of normal. But one of the things that we thought would be interesting is that when you're tracking your ovulation, you can know if it's going to be on that shorter end or that longer end much more confidently. We wanted to know if you're tracking ovulation.
I have done in the past, and I pay attention to cervical mucus, but I'm not tracking in terms of basal body temp. I use the Clue app, which does a pretty decent approximation of when ovulation may be happening, and I just compare that to my cervical mucus, but I'm not writing it down per se, just being semi-aware of, okay, over, probably a few days ago.
Perfect. One of the things that as you're moving into these perimenopause years, right? So late 30s, early 40s, one of the first things that's going to happen is that you're going to skip an ovulation, but you'll still get the cervical mucus.
Oh, interesting. So no basal body temperature spike, but the mucus will still be there.
Exactly. So your body will try to ovulate. It'll create the cervical mucus in preparation for ovulation. But then you won't ovulate at some point. And the only way you'll know is basal body temperature. I wouldn't having a little play with basal body temperature because it's really the only way to know. Yeah. The other thing is that you will probably just have a longer cycle, but it might only be like a day longer than normal, right? The first time I skipped ovulation in perimenopause, my cycle was 33 days. And at that point, in the decade of charting ovulation, I had 31-day long cycles. Almost every year I'd have one randomly long 31-day cycle, but I had ovulated. But that first time I didn't ovulate, it was 33 days. So it was only 2 days longer than normal. I never would have known had I not been tracking basal body temperature. I know, Katie, you had something similar, right?
Yeah. When I skipped ovulation for the first time, my cycle length was the same. Now it's changing. Goodness, it's probably been 9 months actually 8-9 months post the first time I skipped ovulation. So the first time I skipped, it was pretty much on target in terms of the length. And now each cycle length has been completely different from each other. And the only way I've been able to really track, am I ovulating early or did I ovulate at all, is by, Stasha and I both use Temp Drop to track basal body. Yeah. Cause I used to just use like a basal body thermometer like years and years ago. And then for fertility and then pregnant postpartum. And then now that I have kids, I'm like, I'm never up at the same time anymore. So
that was part of why I stopped, because I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to make a plan for what time I'm going to be up.
Exactly. So you just wear it at night and it just does it on itself. You just have to sync it to your app on the phone. So it's so much easier. We have a discount code for anyone listening if you want to try it out too. But because my cervical mucus, I'm not really having that. I'm going to be 46 in a few weeks. So that's definitely, for me personally, has decreased. So the only way I've really been able to pinpoint it is tracking the basal body, because the length, last cycle I ovulated so early and my cycle length was 16 days. The whole cycle. Yeah. And then the month before I didn't ovulate, but my cycle was long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's certainly one of those things that like when you get into a rhythm, it's like you don't really do it anymore. But when you're getting into those perimenopause years, I feel like it can be so advantageous to understanding what's coming next, what's to expect, right? Okay, I haven't ovulated. It's probably going to be a longer cycle. Or I did ovulate, but it was like day 18 this month. So I'm probably not going to get my period until like day 30 or whatever, like looking at your luteal phase and kind of knowing. So one of the things that we were thinking, oh, this might be helpful for you moving forward and tracking ovulation. And our listeners, it's something that we harp on a lot because it is that keystone of the cycle. So it's something we also talk about a lot and the importance of it. But when you're trying to sync your business or your life and use your cycle to help, knowing when you ovulate can be really so helpful, so that you're not guessing about that luteal phase and you're not guessing so much about menstrual. Yeah, can really help. That's me. I definitely fluctuate wildly. So my cycle is somewhere between 23 days to 31 in a year. Usually it's 26 days, but then I have the occasional really short one and I have the occasional really long one. So being able to know that and still work with it, I feel like it's just prep for perimenopause.
Yeah, fair. And I think that's one of the big questions I had when you put out the call for people to come on the show and be coaches. I read Do Less by Kate Northrup early on in my coaching self-development journey. And I loved this idea. I was a midwife at the time still. I love this idea of, okay, look ahead and plan your whole year based on do your speaking when you're ovulating and do your dream time work when your period comes. I'm like, I can't do that because I don't know looking a whole year out. I don't know when those times are going to be because it shifts. Usually it's 25 days, but it's really not uncommon for it to be 23 or 27. And so just that shift means I'm also slowly, because it's slightly shorter than 28 days too, I also shift between full moon and new moon, which is something I pay a lot of attention to. So it's always been a bit like, how do I do this then?
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I have noticed is that when you have to plan something out further in advance, right? So I did live, like those big 500 people live coaching in a hotel in Southern California and Hawaii for years, things with all the big names and stuff. But because I was one of the coaches, like coaching from stage, I would be hanging out with the body workers for the main guru or whatever. And they were like, oh no, every woman always gets her period. Every time I do an event with a woman, they get their period during the event, right? And so I was like, okay, if that's the case, then what do we do? And that's where I was like, okay, if you're planning out further in advance, then you can reasonably guesstimate full moon. Then you have that little buoy of full moon energy. So even if you are
whether or not you're bleeding.
Exactly. So like summits. If I'm going to do a summit where I'm doing live aspects of a summit, I schedule around the full moon. It may not be exactly, but somewhere in that higher energy time, so that even if I'm at my low cycle energy time, there's at least that bit of buoy.
Right.
And then everyone that's coming has that little boost of energy too. So even if
That makes
people
sense.
coming are like, oh, I'm periody, they have a little bit more energy as well. So that's where it's been like, okay, but this is why we talk about quarterly planning for business and flow. Quarterly planning is just a way. When we talk about year planning, we do it in Period Coaching School. We do the year planning in December every year. It's about doing things like, okay, in September, I'm going to do this webinar. And in August, I'm going to do this one. And I'm going to do my summit in October or whatever. You're going, I'm going to do these things for the year, but then you break it down quarterly and you go, okay, on this date, I can guesstimate my periods a little bit more accurately. Now, when you're in perimenopause, that gets real crazy pants when it gets real crazy pants. And that's where you may want to just full-time switch over to using the moon cycles to help schedule things. But when you're at least in that space where you still have some predictability, you can go, look, this week is not the week.
Right.
We're not going to do it this week. If we do it in these 2 weeks, the odds are good. So let's put it in the middle.
Right.
Schedule it then. Yeah. So then you can have those kind of events, those hallmarks in that space.
Yeah. I find it helpful too to have the big ideas and then the quarterly, like really figuring out, is this actually going to fit into other plans that I've made? Because sometimes I'll have grand plans and then I look, I'm like, it's actually not going to work. I've got to move it. Either in the past like 2 years, I've moved it to like, when the kids go to school full time, this is what I will be doing, because I was having a hard time just creating and the time management that I had and like the grand ideas. Like I kept thinking about doing these big things. And then when I was quarterly planning, I'm like, this is still not going to fit into my life right now. I still want to do it, but right now it doesn't make sense. So I like the quarterly for my mindset too, of being like, okay, focus on what you can do. You can still have this great idea. You can push it wherever it needs to go.
Yeah. I find quarterly planning to be so clutch for business with flow that we have a quarterly planner for business with flow, because it's just like that, I feel, is the key to really keeping things in, because then you can readjust each quarter. You have a night happen, you can readjust things, and you can even do things like, say you're planning for the next quarter, right? You can plan the next month pretty accurately because you've probably are real clear where you are in your cycle and what's coming up. You can probably even plan the second month pretty accurately. The third month might be a little bit of a guessing game, but in a lot of examples, so say you're doing a monthly webinar or a monthly live event or Q&A or something like that, that third month, you don't necessarily need to schedule the date when you're doing your quarterly planning. So because my cycle is so wildly different, depending on if this is just going to be that one weird month or not, I never put dates in for that third month, but I put in all of the action stuff. So I will put in like follicular, I am going to do all of the emails for the webinar, all the reminder emails, all the marketing emails. I'm going to get them all scheduled to go out. And then I'll have all of the graphics and stuff in my luteal phase. I'll get those all done. And then on like month 2, when I need to start promoting the next month's event, I'll pick the date, because then I'll have a really clear idea of where I'll be in my cycle. So even that, like in that quarter, month 1, month 2, pretty rock solid planned out. Month 3, by phase planned out, but nailing down the actual dates, I generally wait until I am the month ahead, until I need to put the date on the graphic and put it out there, until I need to put the date on the landing page is done, but I need to put the actual date and adjust the countdown timer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because as you say that, I'm like, I want to know ahead of time. Like I do seasonal events too. And so I time those around equinoxes, solstices, and those moments on that Celtic wheel of the year. And So there's this part of my brain that really wants to just be like, it's this week. But even as you speak, I'm like, it could be the week before solstice or the week after solstice. It doesn't have to be so nailed down in time so far ahead of time. I know roughly when they're happening anyways, what the themes are, but yeah, I love this idea of playing with that and being a little more flexible.
We do that. We have Ladies of the Mountains tea weekly up here, but when we're doing all of the March birthdays and bonfire, and we wanted to celebrate the turning of the wheel. We have a couple pagans in the community. And, but they're lovely. They all texted me, hey, are you going to be able to make it this week or next week? Where are you in your cycle? I was like, I could definitely make it next week. And they're like, next week it is. So we do the same thing. We're like, it's close enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I made the honeyed cakes last year in bulk for our tea. It was a week after, but that was fine.
Nice. Yeah. In bulk's a lovely one because it's really that February 1st date is more of a modern date for it anyways. It's just like about halfway betwin.
That's what we said. We're all like, it's supposed to be the feeling of the turning. We're getting into Spanish, right? So I love it. Okay. What else do we have on here to ask you?
Sleep.
Oh yeah. Hit it.
Yeah. Talk to us about how you're sleeping, like quality, quantity, how you feel when you wake up. Give us kind of a breakdown of just how you're feeling with sleep.
It really shifts and changes over the last over a decade now. I was a midwife, like working on call as a midwife up until, where are we at, 2.5 years ago? And so I have this like very fraught relationship with sleep still left over from that career. For the most part, these days, I think I've done a lot of mindset work to get myself out of the stress loop of entrepreneurship, because that for sure, when I'm stressed, when I'm worried about all the things on my plate, if I haven't got everything done, or if I'm stressed about money, I will wake up at 2, 3 in the morning and just be awake for 2 hours. I do tend to have a bit of trouble falling asleep. But that, again, it feels like mind racing stuff. And I use sleep stories to help me. And that, for the most part, I don't get through a sleep story. If I get to the end of a sleep story, I'm like, tonight is a waste of everybody's time. I may as well just get up. But when I do feel rested when I wake up, for the most part, again.
Yeah, it's hard to get out of that stress sleep cycle, especially I have a lot of friends that are midwives and you're on call. You have to leave your phone on, especially if somebody is having contractions, like early contractions, all of that, you're like in it, right? So, and if you did that for a long time in your career, I can see how your body and your brain still haven't settled into the new routine yet. I noticed you were just taking vitamin D as a supplement. Have you ever tried any other supplements for sleep specifically?
I was taking slow release melatonin for a while. I've definitely on and off dabbled with magnesium. I'm just like terrible at remembering to take things. Oh, and for a while there, I was taking some like adaptogenic mushroom, like ashwagandha blend that was called Calm. Though I felt like that might have actually impacted my sleep negatively. I was reading on it. It was like, reduce the anxiety without making you drowsy. I'm like, oh, I want to be drowsy. So I'm thinking something in there may have actually been having the opposite effect. So I stopped with that. Yeah, if I really feel like I've had a really bad sleep the night before and then I'm like anxious about sleeping well the next night, I'll just knock myself out with some Benadryl. Yeah. Just not a supplement, but
I would definitely try to add in some magnesium glycinate to help with sleep. Definitely, especially perimenopause. Anybody that's listening that is a woman that's like trying to get a good night's sleep should take magnesium. Honestly, we're not getting enough of it from the soil, the food sources. It really helps calm the body. I also had a similar situation with ashwagandha. It made me wired. And other people take it and it actually calms them down. So that's why it's so important to start one thing at a time, see how it actually feels in your body. And then you might need more. I find valerian root to really calm me down before bed, where ashwagandha was like, woo, I'm wide awake. What are you going to be doing? And I'm like, no, we need to go to sleep right now. We can't be doing anything. And also, I'm not familiar with sleep stories, but I find when my brain is racing, I have to do a brain dump. Everything that's happening needs to come out on paper Sometimes I have to write it 5 times to get it out of my head when I'm in that cycle of feeling overwhelmed with work and not being able to get it out of my body. Is sleep stories something like you listen to? I'm not share me.
Yeah, they're part of the Calm app, which is like a meditation app. Chani's actually added some to her app as well, for us Astro people, but they're just like really quietly told stories with no plot line pretty much at all. Some of them are just descriptions, various different narrators, like some famous people, some not. And so for me, it's just like something to focus on that is not my own racing thoughts, that allows me to get to the point of falling asleep. And then I just at some point pull that one earbud out of my ear and throw it on the bedside table or wherever it ends up. Yeah.
I'm wondering if it might be worth trying some energy tools like EFT or something before bed. Because I had endometriosis, right? So I get into that kind of anxiety state. And when you're a midwife and you know that potentially your phone can ring at any point, it's a bit of an anxiety state, right? Like a little PTSD light, where you've just been awoken in the middle of the night so many times to be on call to perform. It's you're in a state of emergency that you're wired now to be on high alert at night. Your brain is wired to be listening, to be thinking, to be on at night. So doing something like EFT, emotional freedom technique, or tapping for the listeners could be one of those things that might help reduce that and help rewire the brain to get out of that emergency alert state in the evenings.
Right.
And I agree with Katie, the magnesium also helps with that because it helps your body to come out of that alert state as well. And I'm a big fan of, I do the drink, the lotion. It's in a calcium, magnesium, D supplement I take at night. Like I have 3 different ways I consume my magnesium before I go to bed at night.
Same, I do too.
Yeah, it's just like that important for my sleep. But yeah, I think potentially doing a little bit of EFT before you go to bed. And it doesn't have to be the big production that I think a lot of people have seen, where it's like you're tapping and you're doing the setup statements and stuff. Like it could be as simple as doing like just the face tapping spots and just going, I don't have to get up. There's no emergency. I'm calm. I'm safe. I'm going to sleep. I'm good. One of the things I like about tapping is that you can tap away the negative stuff too. So you can say, oh my gosh, I have this residual anxiety that I feel in my stomach and is causing this havoc and is making me anxious, and it's making it, my thoughts are racing, and you can tap through all of what's happening in real time. And then you can move into, but I'm calm, I'm safe, I'm supported, I'm cozy, I'm in bed, I'm relaxing, and move into that positive, I guess you could say, phrasing. There's breathing techniques, there's all sorts of other things. But when I see somebody who I have the sixth sense for it now. I can tell when somebody's brain has been wired for anxiety and stress and alertness, because same.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I feel like that will be really useful. I'm going to pop that into my reminder on my phone so that I can remember to initiate a new habit.
And just put it on like your bathroom counter too.
Yeah. That's where I keep anything. I'm like on the back of the toilet. Like if it's going to happen,
everything
somewhere
needs to
I'm going to go
out visually. So I know I can remember to do this. Yeah. But I also find I'm so serious about my sleep. I literally wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, what am I going to be doing throughout my day so I can get to bed on time? I'm like so serious about my sleep.
Yeah.
That once you notice the difference in your sleep, it's going to be a non-negotiable. Your brain is going to be like, give me that magnesium. It won't, like, it's great to have the reminders at first and have it out. But once you really start sleeping in a different way, your body is like almost craving it. Yep. Time for the magnesium.
Yeah, I can see that. That's how I feel about like my mouth guard is okay. We're going to sleep now.
Yep.
I used to sleep with a noise machine as well. I really just like a fan white noise that I really loved, but my partner can't handle it because he feels like he can't hear the bad guys if they break in.
No. You wear a sleeping mask?
I don't, but when I have, again, I used to have to sleep during the day. I find that I don't like it, like always feels bad here or here, even no matter
Mm.
how loose or soft it is, it's not conducive for me. But I don't find the light bothers me too much. Like it's relatively dark where we are. We've got blinds and stuff, so it's not an issue. I have a question, not sleep related,
Yeah.
though it does impact my sleep. That's been really curious. So I think I had a hormonal IUD, the lower one, the Kylena, like 2 years ago. I think I pulled it out, maybe a year and a half. And ever since then, which is like maybe the longest time I've ever gone without some form of birth control. And so I'm significantly more aware and I've been tracking my cycle. I get so crampy and bloated around my progesterone spike during my luteal phase. It's worse cramping for longer than my period. I get like some cramps on day one of my period, but it's 4 days of feeling like looser poops. I know that's the progesterone, but like crampy. It'll wake me up at night. It'll keep me up through the night. And I don't know if there's anything I can do to alleviate those symptoms or if it's just part of my body and the way I respond to progesterone. But I figured
Sounds like
if I had your brain.
prostaglandins to me.
Yeah.
Prostaglandins cause inflammation, cramping,
Mhm.
loose stool. They tend to spike because progesterone is an anti-inflammatory. Prostaglandins are inflammatory. Like literally their job is to call attention to your body that this area needs attention.
Mhm.
So like when you get a cut, the prostaglandins will go to swell up the tissue while your
Mhm.
body rallies like the white blood cells and the scabbing and all that stuff. Like it's the intermediary protective. It's also what causes your bleed. It helps
Right.
the uterus to contract,
Yeah.
which unfortunately sounds like it might be kicking off a little early for you.
And it's funny because it goes away entirely
Yeah.
for anywhere from 2 to 5 days before my bleed actually begins. So it's smack in the middle of my, not totally middle, but close to the middle of my luteal phase.
Questions, Kate?
Anything I can do about it?
Yeah, I was just curious. Talk to us a little bit about your diet and let's see breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. I know it might change day to day, but I'm curious if there's something that might be causing
Yeah.
that to happen
Causing
a little
that.
bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my breakfast is usually either these days I've been having like cereal. It's not very sweetened at all. Like it's got some protein in it, etc. Or toast and peanut butter is very common, or I'll do oatmeal. I usually eat a second-ish breakfast midway through the morning, and that's when I'll get more protein in, like eggs or yeah, eggs and toast or something of that nature mid-morning. Salad and some sort of meat, usually for lunch or a sandwich. I'll try to remember to have a protein shake at some point during the day. Definitely hyper aware of the protein intake these days, just with that perimenopause phase setting in. And then, yeah, like meat, potatoes, vegetables for dinner. Most of our cooking happens at home. I do most of it. Yeah, it feels like pretty standard. Like I don't snack too much. I'll have a square of dark chocolate once a day as my sweet thing. And sometimes we'll have some chips, but that's about it, junk food wise.
Yeah. So not a lot of sugar.
No, not me,
Yeah.
especially. Actually, and saying that, I definitely don't have a lot of sugar, and I have more now than I used to because my partner has a huge sweet tooth. So I will occasionally indulge a little bit more in something sweet, although we don't tend to keep it in the house for that reason. So it really is like I will limit myself to the one. I have a lot more fats and salts than sugar.
What about alcohol or caffeine?
Yeah, caffeine. I have my coffee in the morning, no sugar in it, just cream. And I have 3 small cups. It's a Bodum. So I could probably cut back a little on that. And then I'll usually have a black tea in the afternoon, but I won't drink any caffeine after noon and much less coffee than I used to drink. Like as a midwife, I would drink all the coffee all the time. Yeah. So like it doesn't fluctuate. That doesn't feel like it's fluctuated in a long time. But then again, my body hormones are fluctuating, so it could be that.
Yeah. A thought about the first breakfast and the second breakfast. I might actually switch that so that you're getting more protein first thing. in your body, like within an hour or so, to keep that blood sugar a little bit more balanced, and or thinking about how you can add more protein to what you're having. If it's just like a little bit of peanut butter on toast, that's not really a lot of protein.
My toast does have 12 grams of protein per 2 pieces. And we've got like a sprouted grain. It's $7 a loaf. Bread. So there's actually a significant amount of protein in the bread itself.
Okay.
Which is 12 grams isn't a huge amount, but it's the equivalent of a couple of eggs at least. I find that anything animal protein related first thing in the morning, I just don't, I can't wake up and eat eggs. I can eat them an hour or so after. And I definitely am prone to push through hunger. You know, if my partner wasn't coming down being like, do you want to eat something? I would be like, I'm hungry, but I'll sit and move through. So it might be worth paying more attention there. Alcohol wise, I have a glass of wine every few nights.
Yeah, I'm with Katie. I think I would add nuts to things like oatmeal.
Yeah.
Maybe a little collagen powder or something. You're trying to aim for 30 grams of protein. So it's tough for sure. I definitely had to totally change my breakfast routine as I was gliding into perimenopause, because it was just like not working anymore. What I was doing previously. I had a high protein bread as well that I made, actually, a fermented sprouted bread that I made at home because I had to be gluten-free, and there was no such thing as gluten-free bread when I had to go gluten-free, or like when I realized it, but it was still not enough. So I actually had to really arrange everything to make it work in the mornings. So that would be worth looking at. And then I'm going to just, for everyone listening, cramping and caffeine go together hand in hand.
Okay. Yeah.
Every endo client I have, we step down the caffeine until we're no caffeine. Anyone with painful periods or heavy bleeding, I step down until they're off of caffeine completely as well. So I would say start going half calf, get yourself down to decaf, and move on over to like the roasted root blends or the decaf bit by bit. I'm not a huge fan of ripping off the Band-Aid for most people, so I would step it down so that you're not miserable.
And as you say, and I'm like, I might take the cramping.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? That's also but these days they have a lot of alternatives. And
for sure.
Menopause too, you're so extra sensitive to everything that I bet your sensitivity increases. I bet your sleep disruption gets worse. I bet the cramping gets worse because you're going to be more and more sensitive
that way
where you get into your 40s. Yeah. My suggestion would be half calf it for a week or two, then quarter calf it for a week or two. And then I'll put all this in the show notes, the Temp Drop discount link, but I also have a Ticino discount link because that's what I use with my clients to get them off of caffeine into something that's a nice roasted rooty, dark, bitter blend, but without the acidity of coffee and without the caffeine.
Right.
And I have an order that comes quarterly for our house because that's what we drink. My fiance didn't have a problem going. I was like, I'm sorry, I can't have coffee and I love it. So I cannot have you making coffee in the house because I'll drink it and then I'll be miserable. Like, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm pretty sure there was coffee in my baby bottle. Like, I love it was the last thing I gave up too, trying to deal with endometriosis. I gave up gluten before I gave up coffee. Like, this is 15 years ago, just to tell you my priorities on coffee.
Yeah. But luckily my partner does not drink any hot beverages, so that won't be an issue.
Great. But yeah, I definitely recommend that. And then really my first thing would be the 2:00 the afternoon, switch it over to a decaf, get as far away from your sleep as possible. So the first thing I would do is move that 2 p.m. one to a decaf and then start with the mornings so that you have less caffeine. The problem is they'll purge the caffeine out of their system within 12 hours or something. It's around for us for over 24.
That makes so much sense. I've always wondered when people are like, what, you can't have a coffee after noon? And I started recognizing that no, if I had caffeine after noon, my sleep is impacted. Even if it's a sip, It's nope, now I can't fall asleep. And it's crazy. Whereas I don't find the caffeine in tea bothers me the same way. And I also, honestly, I don't think I would notice the difference at all with a decaf black tea because I just like the flavor. Like that's not associated with waking up. It's the comfort.
Yeah. I have the Trader Joe's decaf Irish breakfast tea.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies' tea, because none of us drink caffeine afternoon, but we have our teas at 3. So we have it for that so that we can have like a tea. But almost all the time they ask for the rose infused Ticino coffee that has no caffeine in it, but they all love that. So that's like our fancy afternoon tea more often than not.
I love the rose cinnamon tea too. That I think it's Tulsi. I think it's a Tulsi brand that I love in the afternoon as well.
I love that too.
Yeah. So even just like different teas. What?
Yeah. I was gonna say Tulsi is a great idea because it's a stress reducer, but brightening. So it's not like caffeine, but I'm a Tulsi a day kid.
Yeah, I love Tulsi. Yeah.
And I usually just make tea blends I'm a gardener, so I have rose petals and all sorts of different hibiscus and et cetera, in my cupboard, my tea cupboard. I just go in and blend together with whatever I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Same. And then I usually add Tulsi because it's just such a nice stabilizing tea that I use it a lot for that base. And sometimes in the mornings in like luteal, when you're just more sensitive, instead of even doing the fake coffee, I'll do a Tulsi tea or something like, or a Robo's or something that's not as heavy even, just because that luteal phase just gets more and more sensitive. Yeah. You know, what are those things like you have a tea cupboard, start that morning with what would support me today? What would feel good today? And I am willing to bet you good money that what your body tells you in follicular and ovulation is not what it asks for in luteal or menstrual.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It actually weaves beautifully into one of the practices I use with my clients all the time is to practice tuning into their intuition, is asking themselves in the morning, what hot beverage do I actually want? What does my body say in this moment? And I don't tend to practice what I preach quite as well as I preach it.
That's why I ask coaches need coaches.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a really good segue into working with flow and business with flow. So share with us what and how you are currently working with flow and your cycle.
Yeah, I pay attention to it. I know that I get really creative and can tend to write and produce a lot of content for my creative content towards the end of my luteal and those first few days of my bleed. Those are really great to harness that because I haven't fully tracked and planned around my cycle because of that kind of shifting nature of it. I just give myself permission on those days where it's my bleed to take my foot off the gas. If there's stuff that needs doing, if it doesn't absolutely have to get done that day, I'm just like, okay, it gets done later in the week. If this thing gets promoted a little less, so be it. I'm going to take that time. I'm going to rest. So I let myself read more and go slow more. And it's helpful for me to remember too that I'm a projector in human design. And so I also have this, like, I get bursts of energy where I get everything done. And I'm like, I finally cracked the code and will be productive forever now. Starting to recognize that not only is that a projector pattern, but then it happens, I think aligns a lot with those follicular days and that kind of ovulation time of, oh yeah, this feels great. And I get this reminder in my head. I'm like, it does. And it's going to dissipate and then it'll come back. But a lot of sense of those kinds of permissions there for sure. And like physical activity wise too, I tend to call off the gym if it's the first 2 days of my cycle anyways, because I don't want to do anything hard. And just dial it back a few notches even in my luteal phase for sure.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a really good, that luteal into menstrual phase is definitely a creative place. And we often talk about what phase in luteal, what's working, what's fun, what's exciting, what's not working, what's wonky, what's causing problems, what's annoying you, that kind of thing for that review in that luteal phase. But it's also a really great visual spatial awareness goes up in that luteal phase. It's funny. People talk about pregnancy dreams, high progesterone, your visual memory increases. You remember your dreams more. Your dreams are usually more colorful and crazy and outrageous in the luteal phase because of that high progesterone. So using that for your business, like you are with the creativity and the writing, and perhaps maybe doing more of the graphics in that phase can be really helpful. I love that you're giving yourself the permission in that menstrual phase. It's a great why phase, though. It's a good motivating phase. So tapping into that creativity, like you were saying, but maybe writing out the whys. Why are you doing it? Why is it beneficial for you? Why is it beneficial for your clients? Why are you the person your clients need? That kind of thing. And then honing in that follicular phase, like using that how phase. How is this working? Systems, tech, the things that in luteal, you'd be like, I'm throwing my computer across the room right now. Are so much more emotionally stable in the follicular phase. So it's a good time. It might still be frustrating, but it's doable in follicular. So I definitely recommend. And then edit. So that creative writing that you do.
Yeah.
All that, go in follicular and edit. Maybe trim things, maybe make it a little bit more concise or coherent, or, okay, this is a really good emotional, I love the story, it's sticking. But like I could bullet point out this next bit or dot point. Sorry,
Right.
I'm trying to eradicate some of the violent language. So not bullet point, dot point out maybe the next paragraph instead and make it a little cleaner and clearer or more precise. Use that follicular phase to really trim and hone and edit and like the copywriting skills.
Yeah.
Phase. And then the how stuff, systems management. If you have to do an email sequence or something, that's a great time to put it together. Oh, I need to make this form, talk to this landing page to trigger this email. That's a follicular phase task.
Right. That's I wish I never had to do that task ever again task.
It is. It's one of the reasons I like Kartra because it just does it all for me.
Yeah. I haven't made the leap to one of those platforms, but it's definitely in my future.
Yeah, it is. But it's part of the business, right? It's when you start off, you do those bits and pieces and bobs and you get it together, and 5, 6, 7 years down the line, or however long it takes a person, especially if you have kids and a family and stuff, it can take longer, that kind of thing. Or you can get really lucky and it just takes off. Things happen, but it's part of the system. It's one of the things we talk about in the school. We start off with a free email system, but you're not going to stay there.
Yes.
You're going to have to move eventually. You're probably going to start on Wix or Squarespace, but eventually you'll move to WordPress. Like, it's fine. It's not permanent. It doesn't have to be permanent. It can be, though, if you love it and it's working and they have an upgradable boost that works for you. But a lot of them don't. A lot of the times you have to move to a different system at some point, and that's okay. That's just part of the business growth. That's a good thing. Celebrate it. You know, give yourself a party.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And then ovulation is that due phase. So if you can arrange it, like with that quarterly planning, so that you're doing the free class or the webinar or the workshop or circle or whatever around ovulation. The only caveat I say is that if you're one of those people with ADHD or neurodiversity, sometimes ovulation can be really aggravating for those. So sometimes ovulation is not the time to do them if you are one of those people that you find, or you have a hormonal imbalance that makes your ovulation like an excessive high. That's happened. I was one of those people in college that was, because my endometriosis was so bad and my ovulation looked like a manic phase. And they were like, I think you're bipolar. And I was like, I don't though.
I just have to squeeze everything in right now.
Yeah. It's just that we only have 2 good weeks a month. So
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend, if you can, schedule those kind of big chunks in those phases. And then when you get to follicular, you should have a really clean list, right? Because if you're going through luteal and go, what's working and what's not working, then you should have a really nice list. So when you hit follicular, the list really should, for the most part, be there. Maybe break some things down step by step a little bit more, but really you should be able to hit follicular and just go tick, tick.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting. I just realized I made my very first social calendar, planned out social content for a month. I have wanted to do this for the whole 2.5 years I've been in business and never managed to do it. I just did it. I was like in that kind of ovulatory phase when I was like, I got the energy, and I did it all in a day, and it was fantastic. And now I'm set up and it just feels easy.
Yeah. Katie and I talk about how one task in follicular will take you like a half an hour, but in luteal it'll take you like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Why waste
Just
time?
planning it out so that you can capture and being flexible with that too, because life happens, right?
Yeah.
And like we were talking about this earlier, so even though it might take longer in luteal, you can still do it. Just be kind to yourself, knowing that you need to block off more time.
Yeah.
So you don't get frustrated with yourself. Like, why is it not working? Well, it is. It's just taking a little bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That seemed like permission around
Yeah.
the menstrual phase, right? Give yourself a little permission to take the foot off the gas, to have a break, to go, okay, this task is going to be the task for the day. It's one of those things where in like follicular and ovulation, I would say, great, what are my top 3 goals for the day? But in luteal, especially deep luteal and menstrual, it'd be like, what's the one goal for the day? Every day doesn't have to have your top 3 goals. I know that's what the business gurus tell you out there, but it turns out you don't have to have your top 3 goals every single day. You can have one goal for the day.
I often encourage people to include rest as a goal.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I like that you said you rest on the first 2 days of your period. It's interesting because as I'm getting further and further into perimenopause myself, I actually have way more energy when I get my period versus other times of my cycle. So I've been like switching and changing things around because I used to really rest, and now my body's, you've got it. Like, we're good.
Interesting. Yeah. I feel like I've had more again, that kind of creative energy in my business where I don't want to be front facing. I don't want to be on my feet. I'm working a part-time job right now as a waitress. And so I'm also like, I hate it when my first day lands on a day I have to be on my feet all day. But I do find that about midway through the first day of my period, I'm like, oh, I'm going to sit down on my computer and I'm going to get shit done. But as long as I don't have to talk to anybody.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's key.
Yeah.
Agreed. I always say I do my podcast episode editing in that phase. I don't want to talk to anybody, but I can edit.
Yeah, fair. Fair.
Good space. But there's also a really good moment to just remember that as you're moving through the 40s, checking in and realizing that it's going to change. This phase may not feel the same, and it may adjust and adapt, and that's okay. And the cycle is a monthly check-in, but it's really a phase check-in. How does follicular feel this week? Is early follicular feeling good, or do I feel like I'm still recovering? Because I feel like I'm taking longer to recover from my periods. I'm in my 40s. I've had endometriosis forever, it feels like it's taking me longer to recover, even though my periods aren't nearly as painful or traumatizing as they used to be. It's still, I feel like it takes me longer. So now rather than going, okay, day 4, I'm going to start doing stuff, I'm going, okay, like day 6, I'll start putting stuff like out on the calendar again.
Right.
But what does that phase feel like for you? Early, middle, late phase. Ovulation is a short one. Luteal, but a lot of people find that right after ovulation, that's first couple days of the luteal phase are real drags. All the hormones plummet. And it feels just draggy days, but then they feel good again as the estrogen rises, as the progesterone rises. So, and some people find that's the phase they really feel, that's when they want to do webinars and stuff. Like they feel calm enough to present really clearly and confidently, but not down yet. So they still feel that confident and stuff. How does it feel for you? You're feeling crampy in that phase. So maybe that's not the phase to be doing front-facing stuff if you can avoid it, so that you can just rest and make sure you're getting enough fiber and all those kinds of things to help pull the prostaglandins out, making sure the liver is supported, making sure you get the fibers and the good fats to help remove any of those excess prostaglandins, help to balance. The estrogen could be too high too, so it's not working properly. That's causing some of those issues. So it could be just a matter of going, I'm going to spend this part of that luteal phase where you're typically getting crampy, just really going, I'm going to do creative stuff. And I'm going to focus on making sure I'm eating all my fats and fibers and drinking water and supporting my liver like a crazy pants.
Yeah.
And then having a couple of days where you're feeling okay again before your period and going, all right, I'm going to knock out a couple of good things here.
Yeah.
Moving back into that menstrual phase. So it could, right, for you, it can just be as simple as going, I'm going to rearrange a couple of things so that I'm making sure that I've got space for my body here. And I'm putting more things into these spots.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited to tuck into my planner after this call and just look ahead for real.
Nice. Any last questions before we wrap up?
No, I feel like we covered so much. I appreciate both of you have clearly a wealth of knowledge.
We'll have to have you come back on and let us know how it's going.
Yeah.
How things
Yeah,
are
I'd love to.
happening. And for our listeners, tell us about your podcast.
Sure. Yeah. So I host the Woo Curious podcast, which is a weekly podcast. It's a blend of solo episodes and having guests on. Stasha was my guest. That episode will be coming out soon, actually, as we record this one today. And basically, I started it with a friend initially and then have branched off solo because I came to all things spiritual and woo late in life. And it's been a really interesting journey of exploring and learning. And we dip into a blend of neuroscience and the more woo things because I still very much love science to support all of these amazing intelligences that we have that perhaps have not been as widely accepted and are starting to become. Yeah, it's an exploration of all of that cyclical living, restful practices, magic in the mundane.
Love it. Well, I was just telling Katie, we're going to have Katie pop on for you. She did some incredible woo work around her fertility journey. So
awesome. Yeah, I'd love to have you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Amazing. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you so much for coming and being on our podcast today. Everyone go over and listen to Eileen's podcast as well after you finish this one. Thanks everyone. We'll see you in our next episode. Bye for now.
A big shout out and thank you to our sponsors for today's episode, Period Coaching School and Katie Bresek Wellness.
Thanks to you, our favorite bestie, for listening to the Period Besties Podcast, where no topic is TMI. And of course, share this episode with your besties.
Remember to leave us a 5-star review, nothing less than the best for us besties, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can follow us on Instagram at Stasha Washburn and at Katie Bresek, or email us at periodbestiespodcast@gmail.com.
Check out more about us at katiebresek.com and periodcoachingschool.com. And of course, check the show notes for free goodies and extras that support this episode.
We'll see you on the next episode.
Bye for now, besties.